Okay, good morning again, everyone. Welcome to our annual convening. And I wanted to share the flip book is a link to, and I'll put that into the chat, to our agenda, but it's also here. So we're starting off at 9 o'clock from 9 to 9:30. A bit of a welcome. 9:30, our first session will begin, kind of building on the work that we started last year, really continually centered on, focused on social justice and anti-racism in teacher education and in classrooms. So we have a really great speaker sharing about the work in LA USD. Session 2 will really begin to unpack, hopefully a little bit more, AB 130 and share some information about how that's being implemented across the CSUs and how we need to be responsive in community colleges. From 12 to 1 is our ACCCTEP business meeting, which is really important, where we'll cover some of the business of our organization, as well as elect our new board members for 22-24. And then session 3, we have a roundtable of different experts who will be sharing some of the really important changes that are really right now happening in early childhood and TK, early education, that we all need to be responsive, understand and be responsive to as well. And then we will also end the session today with a short closing and letting folks know about the results of the election that will take place today. So that's our agenda for today. I wanted to start here. Let's see. Kind of just with a little bit of an update and just, I'm not sure where you're at, but I'm at this place where this is really weird. I mean, it's like the past year and a half has been very interesting. It's been extremely difficult. I've been doing this work in higher education for probably over 25 years. I think it's year 26, and the past 2 years have probably been the hardest. Not because of anything except for, I think, a lot of the changes that are happening, particularly the flip to the virtual world and all the changes that we all happened at one time. The social pandemic, the health pandemic, all of that has really just been a challenge to navigate for all of us. So I just want to thank all of you and honor all of you for the work that you're doing and continue to do on behalf of students and your institutions and your families and your loved ones and all those things. It's really difficult, and I honor that and respect that, and I'm there with you, and continue to just try to stay motivated and stay hopeful for the work that we're doing, and for the efforts that we're putting forward, but also trying to think about a new way of doing things, right? Because if we continue to operate in this same way in many different spheres, individually, institutionally, systemically, we have a lot of reckoning that we have to deal with. And so I think it's important for us to always, I think, stay recentered and reflect on the work that we're doing, and figure out how we can do it in a more humanistic, supportive way that doesn't, grind us all out. But at the same time, as I survey the landscape, and I'm sure you're doing the same thing, with the teacher shortage, and the need for quality teachers and diverse teachers, and just some of the things that are happening in K through 12 and in TK through 12 or P through 12 education, it's really challenging and daunting to think about all the different things that are intersecting right now. But I just want to stay positive, take one day at a time, encourage everyone to, do the work, but also to, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, continue to find the joy in all of it, because that's also critically important. But just wanted to start there. If for folks who are new to ACCCTEP, our goals, I share those there in terms of what we've been standing for and been working towards for several years. It's really advocating for so many things for community college teacher preparation programs, including our opportunities to be seen as stakeholders in this process of preparing teachers for the state of California, creating a credible and collaborative voice for our programs, developing, advancing partnerships for our community college teacher education programs, sustaining our programs once we have them established. And then the fifth one is providing or promoting the institutionalization of our programs. And I know many of us struggle with that piece of it all, is how to keep it all going when we are either a one-person show or a small group of folks who are doing the efforts, and multiple efforts. Sometimes if you're wearing both the ECE and the teacher ed EDU hat, it's very difficult to maintain. So that's our goal, and that's what we're here to support in that regards, and we've been doing some work in that area as well. So the board for 2021 set up 3 goals for us to begin working on, and I'll kind of give an update on where we're at there. The first goal was to really help increase ACCCTEP membership. You know, we want to represent the state's community college teacher education programs. We really want to have a cross section of community colleges from across our state. And so we do have a smattering of that, but we're always looking to try to improve our membership and increase our membership so that we actually can reach more programs in an effective way. And so we did some of that work, and I'll go into that a little bit deeper. Our second goal was to expand our reach as an organization to other stakeholders in teacher preparation in the state of California, including the Cal Council for Teacher Education, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, CSU. We've always had a pretty long-standing partnership with, particularly with Marquita Grano-Schneider in the CSU Chancellor's Office, who's been an amazing partner. And then also building bridges with our state chancellor's office for our own system and our own academic senate. And then I proposed a long-term goal that I've been thinking about for a long time as a coordinator and someone who advises students who are on this pathway about how we might work to really transform undergraduate or lower division teacher preparation that is more aligned with the students' needs, because we see many students who enter our colleges as freshmen or in their first 2 years who know they want to become a teacher. Yet the pathways leading towards becoming a teacher are pretty unclear and sometimes very confusing, or do not provide a lot of, I would say, a longer on-ramp to the education building as a teacher educator. So that's one of our third goal, and kind of a long-term goal that I'll talk about as well. So in terms of membership, we've done a lot of work. If you were with us earlier in the year, we did the March Madness, trying to build off the, the basketball tournament kind of mentality of, hey, let's try to do a big frenzy at one point in time. And so we offered actually from March all the way to June, a free first-year membership for all brand new community colleges who were new to ACCCTEP, and then a BOGO, buy one, get one, for those who wanted to renew. And that was somewhat successful. I think we've got a handful of new colleges joining us. So if you're new, welcome to ACCCTEP. And we got several colleges who renewed and got a buy one, get one for next year. But I think as I look at the membership, there's still much more to do there, because our current membership reflects less than 50% of the community colleges in our state. And so would really want to continue to try to do work in that area. So bring a friend, tell a friend. After today, encourage participation in our organization so that we can have a really robust group of folks who are helping driving our goals and our mission. In terms of the second goal, I think we've done really well in this in terms of extending ACCCTEP's reach. And I'll spend a few minutes here talking about the work that we've done here in terms of connecting with other stakeholder groups. If you are not familiar with the Cal Council on Teacher Education, CCTE, they are actually the statewide body of teacher educators from CSU, the UCs, the independent colleges in the state of California. So these are deans, directors of programs, and faculty of teacher education programs, primarily of the four-year universities, public and private. And they have opened their arms and welcomed ACCCTEP as an associated organization, and they welcome community college teacher education faculty and program leaders into their organization. And they provide a lot of professional development. They have access to scholarly articles and journals, and their conferences are really wonderful. And they really, really support the current president of CCTE, and the incoming president of CCTE are very strong supporters of community colleges and want to find ways for us to bridge the work together. And so I highly encourage you to take a look at their website. If you are interested in joining their professional organization, you can definitely do that as a community college staff or faculty or director, and then participate in their conferences. They have a spring conference that really focuses on policy related to teacher education. So they have access to legislators. The CTC is often involved with their meetings and providing them with really direct updates. And so that is an organization that has really opened their arms to the community colleges and ACCCTEP, and we encourage joint participation in both. In fact, in the fall semester, during October, they have their annual conference, and it's at a beautiful location in San Diego. Several of the board members and other community college folks attended, and it's a space where it's really great professional development, and I think something that we're going to try to connect with in the future to see if we can connect ACCCTEP with CCT in a more formal way, so that we could potentially host our conferences or our convening and our conferences together, because it's a great way to connect with our peers at CSU. Plus, as folks who are there, the location is beautiful. It's an amazing, beautiful location, and it'd be great for all of us to join. The second piece is UCLA started something called the California Educator Diversity Project, and I'll drop the link into the chat as well. And so this is a group of stakeholders in California, from CSU, UCs, the Board of Education, unions, major stakeholders in teacher education, and really looking at how we can diversify the teaching force in California. And the leader of that project is Dr. Kai Matthews, and she has also really welcomed the community colleges. And I've had really good conversations with her, as well as serving on the collaborative, to talking about how and expressing the concerns of how community colleges are often underseen or underutilized and underfunded, particularly as pathways. And so she's been really responsive, and the group has been really receptive to hearing more about how the state's community colleges can be a more robust pathway, or ways to build those bridges. So they just released the California Education Diversity Project actually just released a news brief, a research brief actually, on the funding that's coming through for teacher education in the state of California. I think it's 1.5 billion. I think that's the number that's been attached to the amount of funding that's currently available, and all the different projects and funding streams that are available for primarily LEAs, school districts, to begin trying to develop future teachers through a number of different ways. So take a look at the book, take a look at the research brief, and so you can kind of see what the landscape is in teacher prep for funding. And encourage you, if you have a partner LEA that you're working with a school district, to see if you can connect with them. Unfortunately, community colleges are not explicitly mentioned in some of the funding streams, but we are not excluded as partners, but it's going to take work for you to reach out to your local LEA school district if they're going to submit projects, to see if you can partner with them in a way that you can also receive support. The other place that we've gotten some traction with is the American AICCU, the private colleges. So because of my participation in the California Educator Diversity Project, the president of AICCU reached out to me as well in ACCCTEP, and is really interested in working more systemically with community colleges as a whole, to build partnerships to four-year universities that are private in their scope. And so I know that there are several across the state who have these partnerships. I know we have one in Southern California, particularly in Rancho District with Chapman. I know others are doing it. So there's a deep interest in those as well. And I know they're doing work in the Fresno area, also with their private schools. So that's some areas for development as well. We did make some ground with the CTC, the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing for California. ACCCTEP was able to join or request a stakeholders meeting with the executive director and the staff, and we really had a chance to kind of share shared visions for teacher preparation and for how we can support students, particularly around the new regulations that were coming out previously with AB 130. And so they were very supportive of ensuring that our classes and our students were included in part of those discussions of how AB 130 will be implemented and is being implemented as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. That led to the CSU AB 130 task force that Marquita developed to help all the CSUs come together to kind of figure out some uniform guidelines on implementing AB 130, which will be discussed in a later session today. But I think what we're still missing as an organization is a connection with our chancellor's office. I think a real connection with our chancellor's office and previous grants and projects and those kinds of things. We did have those connections. We're still, I think we're still needing that piece of, I think, advocacy at the system level office. So that's will be an area that we're working on as well. And then finally, this last goal here is, I talked about a little bit about this long-term goal that I will ACCCTEP and I've shared with the board and others and in other spaces about really trying to see how we can better define the undergraduate pathways for our students, lengthen the teacher preparation on-ramp so that our students are actually doing more. I know they do in ECE, they do a ton of work, but in K through 12, future elementary, secondary, and special ed, I mean, we do a lot of content preparation, 1 or 2 education courses. How do we really ramp that up in a way that makes their lower division program very much a part of their teacher education, and it doesn't start only when they begin their credential program? And so that's part of my thinking and how we might be able to do that. And then what that would do is would allow us to build education articulation courses at the lower division level. So that would give us the capacity and the framework to add faculty at the community college level, and then build out support from there, counseling support, other types of support for our students in a more structural way that already fits within our system. So that's the dream that I have in terms of trying to move this stuff forward and hope that we can engage in these conversations about how this might work, and particularly with some of the AB 130 changes and changes to subject matter competency, how this all might kind of play out. But I just want to thank you all for the work that you're doing, for being here, and just for all that you do. I know as we talk in other meetings, the tireless work that you're all doing, and probably all doing on top of being here today. You're probably juggling another something else is happening in your programs and at your colleges, and we deeply appreciate the partnership and your membership and your collaboration. So I will pull up there for any questions or comments, concerns. We'll bring us back to
Steve,
our, yeah.
So I just wanted to thank you. I was going to type it into the chat, but I was on my phone. So anyway, you thanked all of us, but I, looking at everything that's been accomplished, especially in this last year of everything that you mentioned, you have been an amazing leader. So I just want to take a moment to thank you as well.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to do this work. It's important, and as I know how important it is. So it's and I can't do it without the folks who are here supporting all of us. So we are at 9:27. I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Dr. Marini Smith, who will be, I'll stop my share, who will be introducing our keynote speaker, or session 1 speaker.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Marini Smith, and I am an associate professor now at West Los Angeles College, and I teach child development and education courses. I'm also the Title V STEM teacher prep coordinator, and as Steve introduced in the beginning, I am one of the appointed South representatives on the ACCCTEP board, and I'm very proud to be a member. I'm also very proud to introduce our keynote speaker, Tarik Smith, who is a Restorative Justice Teacher Advisor at a middle school in Los Angeles Unified School District in the Central Region. I'm also proud to say that he's my husband, so you better make me look good. He should be here any second. He is actually wrapping up teaching a class. So just so that you all know that you are getting information from someone who has a lot of experience in what he does, but not just the theoretical part, but in practice, because he's actually in the trenches doing the work. So just a little bit of background about what RJ is. In May of 2013, LAUSD adopted the School Climate Bill of Rights. Sorry, my phone was ringing. I'm like, what's going on? It's my mom. So I'm gonna decline just to make sure everything's okay. And restorative justice practices were adopted by LAUSD as kind of an answer to what we were seeing as no tolerance, zero policies. And we saw lots of punitive measures taken that disproportionately impacted students of color, right? So we're seeing the school to prison pipeline being perpetuated. And so ultimately, school districts like LAUSD wanted to put practices in place to mitigate the impacts to our children of color. So restorative practices promote and strengthen positive school culture. So in this session, we're going to learn a little bit about restorative practices. We're going to engage in some practical activities. You're going to get lots of resources, and you'll see how restorative practices tie into a lot of other approaches and paradigms that we talk about in teacher education, like trauma-informed care, social emotional learning. Since this session, our annual convening, our topic is critical issues in education. We thought it was very important that we look at critical issues in education, but also how can we inspire and encourage future teachers to be prepared for what these expectations are going to be for them when they enter into the classrooms. So if we're having disparities in the treatment of students of color, and we're moving towards anti-racist practices, we're moving towards equity and social justice, then this is what our future teachers are going to be expected to do. So what does that actually look like in the classrooms? How can we inspire and influence teacher prep programs to make sure that our teachers going into the classrooms are equipped and understand the restorative practices that they're going to be implementing in the classes? So this is kind of the idea behind having this as our initial presentation today for our annual convening. What questions do you have for me before I turn it over to Mr. Smith? I just need to make sure that I have a co-host. I'm going to be kind of serving as his assistant. I will be monitoring the chat. I will be assembling the breakouts. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my husband. I was going to say my handsome husband, but I guess I did. So I'm very proud to introduce Tarik Smith.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. Looking forward to sharing work that I am extremely passionate about, and that is near and dear to my heart. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Let's get this in present mode here. So thank you for that kind introduction. I appreciate being called handsome by someone as beautiful as yourself. Let's start by going over our objectives. So for today, participants will be provided with an overview of restorative justice practices within the context of LAUSD. including the move from restorative justice to restorative practices and PBIS, which is short for positive behavior intervention and support. Participants will have the opportunity to see an RJ circle. We will be looking at a video from Oakland, who are kind of spearheading this whole restorative justice movement. And we will also be looking at how RJ practices connect to SEL learning, and how we can do that in a way that's meaningful for our students. I have also woven throughout this presentation some testimonials from people that I work with here at Carver Middle School, which is in South LA, if you're not sure where that is. So this is from my assistant principal, who says that as an AP here at Carver Middle School, I've seen firsthand the powerful, positive passion RJ and SEL brings to our campus. Teachers are able to develop a framework that creates a climate of care and concern for their students. Students learn to embrace a new way of handling their problems. Love it. And that's from one of our assistant principals, Dr. Williams. This is our agenda for today. I'll, of course, tell you a little bit more about myself. We have already covered the objectives. We will be looking at restorative practices, community building, restorative conversations, and norm setting. We will have some time to reflect ourselves in terms of restorative conversations and SEL connections. And then we will hopefully have some time for questions and answers. It is definitely a tight agenda. And then if all of you could do me a favor and fill out an exit ticket to kind of discuss what are your takeaways and things that you enjoyed and even things that could be improved. And this is my lovely family in the middle. I am the proud father of 4 children who are all completely amazing in their own rights, and they inform a lot of the work that I do. And actually, as I've become more restorative, I think it's helped me be a better father, better husband, better person overall. I love snowboarding. I'm actually going to be taking my youngest son, who is pictured there, or my second youngest son, snowboarding next week. Looking forward to that. And yes, that is me way up in the air in the corner there. It's probably been a little while since I've done that, but wanted to show what's possible. I love the angle because it looks like the earth is hundreds of feet away. Pretty funny. So let's start by checking in the chat. This is something that is highly important in the work that I do, is just acknowledging that how we feel matters is something that's especially important in Black and brown spaces. A lot of times when we think about historically, we've been denied that right to mental health. And so I'm always reminding our students and our staff how much how we're doing matters. So if we could think about what our weather is today, what's the weather that's most representative of how you are feeling in this moment today? And then we can go ahead and type that in the chat. All right, starting to see those come in. All right, I love the detail. Okay, and I'll give it a little bit more time for those to come in. I like that, overcast, but sun is coming through. Spring and sunny, so lovely to end the week with you all. All right, so I'll give it a little bit more time for more comments to come in. Cold and getting warmed up, all right. Okay. So I am going to show you a little bit of a video. Again, like I said, Oakland was kind of the epicenter of the beginning of this RJ movement, which if we think about the circle practices specifically, it is a very indigenous practice. So a lot of this stuff is really ancient and time honored and important in terms of how we relate and build community. But Oakland really kind of spearheaded this happening in school spaces, especially in urban schools where things were over punitive. So let's check this out. I'm gonna show us about 6 minutes of this video.
They come in, they're giggling, they're laughing. And there's just like a lot of kind of like giddy, intense energy.
I'm in for what?
And in the circle and their relationships with each other actually kind of like quiet something in them and allow them to be more present for each other.
When we do circles here, before we do the circles, we sit down and like plan the opening ceremony. My great hope is to laugh as much as I cry, to get my work done and try to love someone. And I have enough courage to accept the love in return. Maya Angelou. And in high school, especially, like we don't have enough, connections with each other sometimes, everybody just all focused on the work and, stress at home and stuff like that. And circles create a space where people can talk about their feelings, about how they're doing home life. Now we will review our class values. The first one was being open. The other one is respect. We share our values to respect each other and stuff like that. Because, we all are still humans and people get sensitive sometimes. So we're trying to make sure, that everybody feels comfortable and doesn't get their feelings hurt. Okay, now we will share an object that relates to hope.
I have my I Heart Being Black bracelet because I hope that everybody is proud of who they are.
I got this play to win thing from a boyfriend and we exchange bands all the time. And this brings hope because it just keeps me going.
My mom made this necklace for me and it represents hope because she never had time to do anything for herself. They're being asked to be vulnerable to a group of people, which is kind of like antithetical to what it's like to be a teenager, which is what's the best way to hide right now. So the first thing that I do is I share as deeply as I possibly can. I feel like if I can share deeply and from my heart and listen really attentively to other students, they're looking at me to see how I'm behaving.
I have you guys give me a lot of hope and stuff like that. Our advisory is like a family. I've been through police brutality, tragedies and stuff like that. And instead of me being depressed about life, I know I can come in and talk to my community. They understand. And most of the time, if it's something I'm going through, they've probably already been through it before.
People act like they shy and stuff like that, and like the icebreaker loosens and, everybody up, we all get in a good mood and then we're ready to talk.
The wind comes and blows if you live in Oak.
The wind comes and takes anyone whose shirt is black.
The wind comes and takes anyone that likes to play basketball.
Anybody who has headphones. Anybody that lives in East Oakland. If you're wearing shorts. The wind comes and
blows if
I have on a pink shirt. I picked this talking piece. This show is hard and we're a strong community.
It's kind of like step up, step back, because, I am stepping up by, putting myself out there and being a facilitator. But I'm also like stepping back because I'm letting other people talk as well.
What's good about being a teenager?
you get more freedom now.
You get to know people really deeply.
If you look back on your childhood, you realize that there's certain things that you couldn't do when you were that age.
You get the taste of being an adult.
Man.
So, yeah, you're like...
I find it balanced to be serious and be funny. If we're saying something that's, sad, that just changes the whole direction of the circle. So, eventually somebody has to say something to make the circle, bring back to life. Because if it's sad, nobody's going to want to talk again.
And sort of like letting the circle alternate between serious and light. We can laugh in certain moments. We can allow this to become lighter so that we also stay more resilient in the circle. And laughing with them is really important. And it also shows I respect all of who they are.
What's hard about being a teenager?
Sometimes you just want to do stuff that you think you're ready for, but then when really you're not, and you just want to grow up too fast sometimes.
When you're a child, you know how you're always so happy and stuff like that. Now you're a teenager and you know what stuff's happening in the world, and like you feel sadder. I don't remember being happy. Like the closest time I remember that was when I was like 6. So the one thing I hate about being a teenager is like you can't be as happy as you were as a kid.
I remember really wanting to leave home from really the time I started high school. I had to just like sit with it and wait until I was old enough to leave the house, even though I wasn't necessarily ready.
I have more responsibilities now. Take care of my little brother, family members and everything. It's really harder now.
You have to learn how to say things without getting in trouble, or like the right way how to say it without like getting an attitude. Before I came to Midwest, I didn't have no self-control. Like in class, I was a class clown. Like, and I never listened to my teachers. And getting suspended, I never cared. And every time I got a phone call home, I used to lie and say, "She lying. I never did that." When I'm in a circle, I feel opened up. The circles is a part of me treating people better because I see how people are when people open up, and I see how they're treated, and I know I wouldn't want nobody to treat me like that.
They come into the room with 9 years of experience of this is what kind of student I am. And I just think that's the power of a circle. You are exactly who you are as you are in relationships with your peers. Someone who she doesn't get to be most of the time.
You can control yourself. You don't need nobody to tell you to stop. You know if you right or wrong.
If you could change one thing about being a teenager, what would it be?
Everyone should have a mentor, not only about your schoolwork, but like what goes on in your house.
They're wondering why teenagers are like becoming more and more obese, and it's because they don't feed us healthier foods.
School should be more interactive because the best way to learn is hands-on.
They'll see us like we're little kids, but they don't know what's going on in our minds. They don't know if we're maturing.
What are the things teenagers can do to make a difference in their lives or others?
Think about things twice before you do anything. That was my lesson learned. Because if I would have thought about it the second time, I've probably never been in the trouble I'm in.
Don't be so negative. Once you're negative around people, like people get negative too. You're positive, then everybody around you going to be more positive, even if they're around like their household is negative.
Her ability to build relationships with her peers, to allow me to know her more deeply, to allow other people to help harness her energy of this is the kind of student I am. I think it's allowed her to stay here.
So we're going to do the closing ceremony.
Okay, so that's a good place to stop. All right. So yeah, I would love to have some comments either in the chat or if anybody would like to unmute themselves and kind of share out their reactions or things that are top of mind after hearing these beautiful children in community.
Hi everyone, I'm Angela Bever. I thank you so much for sharing this video. I have some videos that I've curated for my introduction to teaching elementary school class for restorative practices, but this one is much more in depth and really beautiful. And I'm a 3rd grade teacher in Bay Point. And really this really resonates with me. I've been practicing restorative justice and restorative practices for several years now. I've been the PBIS coordinator at my school for about 6 years. And I can tell you that this doesn't just work with high school students, it works with all ages, all the way, down to TK. And it is so incredible how much the students respond to circles. And it just depends every year. Sometimes I do a lot of community circles, especially at the beginning of the year when we're building community, but restorative circles are so powerful as well. And it just depends on every year how many restorative circles I do, but it is something that's beneficial for all students, especially our ones in most need. So thank you so much for sharing this.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the really thoughtful comments. It's nice to hear from other practitioners. Can we have maybe one more comment before we move on to the next part of this presentation?
Would you like me to read a couple of comments that were in the chat that I thought were pretty amazing? So
yeah, for sure. I'm looking at those. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So Leticia wrote, I think RJ really highlights students already existing resiliency. It's way more student-centered and community-centered than a lot of the social emotional practices that schools are implementing.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so obviously we have a lot of expertise in the room, and I appreciate that. Thank you for lifting up what is important or meaningful about RJ. Let's go ahead and go to our next slide. I wanted to ground us in some data. This is something that I came across as I was looking around to give more context for why we have been moving in the direction of restorative justice and PBIS and social emotional learning in our district. So you can see the pretty precipitous drop here between 2011 12 and 2017 18. This is kind of like a 6-year span of time where suspensions for defiance were kind of outlawed or gotten rid of. It wasn't technically against the law to do them. There were still some schools that were using that particular means or mode for suspension, but you can see that there was a sharp drop in how many suspensions were happening. It was actually around 70% in this 6-year time. So this is also the same time that restorative justice was being rolled out as kind of an alternative to suspensions, and also with the hope that we can do our best to disrupt the school to prison pipeline that we know has been working generationally at this point. So wanted to point out the kind of differences in how LUSD is approaching discipline and how important restorative justice is in that piece. So let's look at another testimonial. This is from our school climate advocate. I'm also really lucky to work with a lot of great people. So RJ Circles have been a transformative tool on our Carver Middle School campus. Being able to effectively use an inclusive process to find consensual outcomes for our students has made it possible to envision alternate ways to manage conflict. Throughout the RJ process, our students not only have been able to gain interpersonal connections with others, but are given the space where their voice is heard. And I love the idea of student voice and involvement in the school community. So thinking about the big picture of restorative justice, it focuses on repairing harm to relationships instead of assigning blame. It is about those relationships instead of dispensing punishment. This practice is very effective when dealing with harm or misconduct. Restorative practices inspired by the philosophy of restorative justice are a framework for preventing behavior through building community, authentic dialogue, coming to a mutual understanding, and making things as right as possible. And again, restorative justice is completely dependent on the feeling of community. And when students are bought in, when teachers are bought into the idea that this isn't just a place that we come to, but it is a place where we thrive, where we care about what happens to others, where we carry ourselves in the best possible way because of that care, you know, that's all because of the community that's been created. So positive behavior intervention and supports is an evidence-based 3-tiered framework, which we'll look at in the next slide, for improving and integrating the data, systems, and practices affecting student outcomes every day. It is a way to support every student while creating schools where all students are successful. So this is the 3-tiered approach to school discipline or restorative practices. Tier 1, which the person who made the comment earlier about community building, especially at the beginning of the year, that's something that all students should be receiving, all staff should be receiving. Social emotional learning, which we'll talk more about later, is again, intervention and support that everybody should be exposed to. Effective statements and questions, again, is something that all people who are participating in the school community can benefit from. And again, if we're doing this first tier well, what I notice is that we have a lot less students who end up needing the tier 2 and 3 supports. So it's really about aggressive positivity and building a positive community. And then tier 2 is for students who may need a little bit more intervention, if there are conflicts or tension that arises, or students are not being successful with the typical levels of support. And then tier 3 is for students who may find themselves needing to be reintegrated into the school after maybe being locked up. We've definitely had those situations, or students who have been committed due to mental health issues and will be re-entering the school system after being away. Those are the places where we would have that intensive targeted support, safety plans, wraparound services, those kind of things. And then for our goals of restorative practices, the idea is that through this kind of investment and enrollment in the community of the school, we will promote accountability and behavioral change, that everyone will be committed to repairing the harm and developing empathy for both the harmed and the harmer. I feel the most pride when I am able to get students to not just reflect on, you know, the person that they may have hurt or offended or bothered, but also to think about how that impacts the overall community. That happened in a classroom and it may have set the classroom culture back. That that situation may have caused people to have to make phone calls, spend lots of time working on the situation, so that harm can spread out beyond just the initial people that were involved. And so those are the kind of things we want to get our students to think about. We want to reintegrate the harmer and the harm to be able to exist in the same space, and for harmony to be restored. We also want a safer, more caring environment by building community, allowing positive relationships to occur between students and students, between students to teachers, between school staff and other school staff. Those relationships flow in a myriad of directions, and we want to make sure that they are all healthy. A greater staff capacity to deal with challenging situations and a reduction in bullying and other interpersonal conflicts and suspensions. And super important, especially in a middle school environment, we have, you know, all of these atoms constantly bumping up against each other, and things happen. Mistakes are made, and we want to make sure that we're restoring people back to their best possible selves. And when we think about the different components, these are our key practices: community building circles, which you saw an example of in the video, restorative conversations, which we will be looking at, and norm setting, or integrating everyone into the same beliefs and values in the school. So we are going to set up breakout rooms. Thank you, Marini, for your help with that. We're going to be looking at addressing situations or problems from a restorative perspective and using these restorative questions. You can see on the left that these are when challenging behavior occurs, and getting students to reflect in a deeper, more meaningful manner than just saying, what did you do? And, you know, shaming and blaming, and making the transition to students knowing what they did and being able to grow from that. And then we also want to make sure that the students who have been victimized or have been hurt or harmed are able to really think through what happened and what they need in order to feel like things are as right as possible.
All right, are we ready to move into our rooms in just a moment? I did put into the chat, so you're going to notice when you click on the Google Doc that there are 5 different scenarios, and they're different grade levels, different scenarios. Some of them might sound eerily similar or familiar to things that you may have experienced. So depending on which breakout room number you have, so if you're breakout room 2, you'll look at scenario number 2, breakout room 5, you'll look at scenario number 5. So there are 5 different scenarios, and you will be in breakout groups of about five individuals per group. We'll give you about 5 minutes to take a look at the scenario and then think about some of these restorative questions that you would use to guide yourself in those scenarios. How would you address that scenario in a way that is restorative? And all of the information you'll find on the link that's in the chat. Just make sure that you go to the link or copy and paste the link, because you know, once you get into the breakout rooms, you won't see the link anymore. So just make sure that you access that first. What questions do you have about the task before I disperse you into your rooms? Okay, so we'll come back at about 10:06. You should see your rooms opening up now.
So I guess while people are making their way back into the main room, is there anyone who would like to share out what that felt like in terms of restorative conversations? And we can do that in the chat, and also you can unmute yourself if you're comfortable with that.
I can share if so for us, our scenario was that a student was walking around and wasn't it was supposed to be during independent time, and I think even having the lens of restorative justice allows for just different responses as a teacher. You know, instead of escalating the situation and giving ultimatums, like what would a restorative conversation look like with a student? You know, one-on-one, not necessarily doing a restorative justice circle for that, but having a different approach that is humanizing and that really works with the student to see, you know, what is kind of at the root of what's happening there.
Yeah. One of the things that I've never been able to get out of my head since I've heard it is all behavior is functional, and that's the idea that, like, you know, any behavior that's done expresses a need, right? And if you really want to actually get to better behavior, then you're going to have to understand those needs. And also, we really have to think about how we are interacting with our children. Are we just out for compliance, or are we really invested in our young folks as people, right? And like really growing their agency. And to me, those things look very different in a classroom and in our school settings. So I'm always thinking about that. Like, am I, you know, and if I'm having a difficult conversation, am I just looking for compliance? Am I just looking to win this conversation? Or am I actually looking to, you know, really be there for that child that's struggling or having difficulty? So let's keep this moving. I'm taking my best shot to get through all of this stuff. This is a worksheet around how restorative you are. So this is something to think about. It's kind of small here, so I'm actually going to put up, let's see here, let's make this a little bigger. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So again, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of this. This is included in the landing page, which you all have access to, and has, I know there was a teacher that mentioned teaching elementary and that this works for elementary students. Absolutely. And there are resources in there that are geared towards elementary. And so let me just read a couple of these and get you to think about them. So in a restorative conversation, or when you have the opportunity for being restorative, are you listening without interrupting? That's a tough one. It really takes work to not cut kids off, especially when we're trying to be prescriptive or we think we know what the solution is. Do I take responsibility for any part I might have played when things went wrong? Acknowledge it and apologize. That is one of the things that I try to be really sincere about is, you know, even if I was only 3% wrong in the situation, I'm going to talk about that 3% and really model, you know, model accountability and taking responsibility. Let's see, a couple more here. Do I collaborate with the student to formulate a plan? Do I try to handle most issues or incidents myself? Do I seek support when issues get tricky for me? Is the relationship with the student repaired? So all things to think about if we are truly being restorative. Okay, so I have to now bring up a hero of mine, Dina Simmons, who has been doing amazing work in SEL, kind of turned my world upside down a couple summers ago when we were going through all of the George Floyd stuff, and I was already considering how to make the work that I do more relevant for the lived experiences of our Black and Brown students who live in a community where, unfortunately, they do not feel safe, and police do not help them feel safe. Those are kind of important aspects of having a racial equity lens. And if we don't consider those things, if we're just using SEL as another tool to manage our kids, again, for compliance, then she says SEL is the same thing as white supremacy with a hug. And, you know, that really kind of shook me to my core when I first heard her saying this. And it's kind of really got me to reevaluate a lot of the work that I do and really figure out how I can be more responsive to the lived reality of our students. So what I'm going to do now is, I have another testimonial. Let me read that one first. The RJ program at our school, combined with daily SEL lessons, fill our students' toolboxes with a variety of skills and knowledge that help them navigate and understand the world they have inherited. The carefully crafted lessons incorporate historical context so that students can develop an understanding of how we got here, while specific instructions and practices like goal setting help them make and follow a plan for success. So what I'm going to do now is take you through a week of SEL lessons. At our school, we are lucky to have SEL incorporated into our advisory. It's something that we do daily with our students, and it's a really important and critical part of what we do to build positive community and culture here at Carver. So I'm just going to take you quickly through some of the things. We won't really have time to do all the activities, but I wanted you to kind of see how these things look in real life in a way that's relatable and accessible to our students. So, of course, we start with welcoming them back. These are the activities for the week. And again, this is the first week that they came back this year. So it's really about making our students comfortable and setting them up to get to know each other in a positive way. During this week, we wear name tags so that people can address each other by name. And there's also a really important activity embedded in this week where we look at the importance of names and how it connects to our lineage and how names really give us meaning and purpose. And that's been a really important thing for me. With the name Tarik, it's been mispronounced my entire life. And I remember being, at war with a few teachers who I think were pretty, callous in that regard in terms of like treating my name with respect. And so I remember being locked into some pretty difficult struggles or conflict with teachers who refused to respect my name. So I refuse to do further damage or harm in my school setting now that I have the power for that. And especially thinking about our Latino students who have teachers who are not Spanish speaking and how there can be a lot of difficulties that arise out of that. It makes me really sad when I see students who have just kind of given up and let teachers anglicize their names and like how much kind of violence is embedded in that exchange, So we set it up in the beginning that we take names seriously, that it is a super important part of our identity. And I love GIFs. It's still, even though I know that's a proper pronunciation, it's still funny to say GIFs instead of GIFs. But I like to embed, interesting ways for our students to check in and talk about how they are doing. And they have a good time with it. And again, it normalizes the idea of like checking in with yourself and knowing how you're feeling and doing. Another activity, I'm sure you guys have played People Bingo or various versions of that. That's another activity that we do for this week. Like I said, we talk about names. And then another really good activity from this week. I wish I had time to play this video. I don't. But another thing that they do is they write a letter to themselves. Kind of, we're getting to know each other, but we're also getting to know what we care about and believe ourselves as students. So they write this letter and it's sealed and then given back at the end of the year. So another exciting activity. So these are all things that we do to build community, and you can see how there is this inherent connection or thread that ties all of these different types of things like PBIS, RJ, SEL together. We do circles on Fridays. And again, with the focus being getting to know each other, you can see that.
Hello, Carver. This is your friendly librarian. Just a reminder.
Apologize for the interruption. I am at work. So yeah, we want students to think about how they want to have goals for the year and how we're starting the year off in a positive way. And that is a week of SEL lessons. So something that I want you all to think about, and I've mentioned this a couple of times through the process, is that restorative practices kind of lie under this larger umbrella of being trauma informed, of social emotional learning, of social justice. and really about access and entry points for our students to feel whole and human and integrated into the school environment. One more testimonial. So RJ being present on campus is crucial. Giving staff and students the space and opportunity to mine relationships contributes to the school culture in a major way. When RJ was not present on our campus, you definitely seen fights happening every day. And that is from our school psychologist, another talented person. We're lucky to have a lot of great people working here at Carver. And all right, we have time for questions and answers. So I am going to go ahead and stop my share. It'd be nice to see people here.
I also just put into the chat again, I've been putting it in periodically throughout the presentation. There's a really, really great resources page or landing page, that Google Doc. It links to so many different resources that Tarik has meticulously curated with other colleagues as well. So please make sure that you save that link, bookmark it, because it has a wealth of resources for you if you're curious about restorative practices, if you want ideas for lessons, recommended readings, etc. How does this work in elementary school versus secondary, etc. So definitely check out that link.
Yeah, I try not to flood you with resources, so I try to pick things carefully. Obviously, there are way more things I can give you if you would like. My email is included there. I welcome you to reach out if you would like to talk more about this stuff. I talk about it all the time, whether I'm getting paid or not, on the weekends, in the morning, at night. So it would be my pleasure to build with any of you about this stuff. So yeah, let's go ahead and take some time to have questions. It looks like Veronica has her hand raised.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I don't so much have a question so much as I just want to thank you for sharing this information, Mr. Smith, because it really takes a lot to learn something new in, as a practitioner, as an instructor, to build it into your pedagogy, but then to share it with others. Because we can take it back to our students in our programs, and it's incredibly valuable. So I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to curate all this information and being accessible and generous with what you have worked with on a daily basis, and helping us have access to it. And secondly, I did attend the ACCCTEP USD Step Up Career Ladder Conference with some of our education students maybe 3 years ago. And we were able to pick some workshops, and one that I attended was like this introduction to restorative justice practices. So just really kind of started the conversation for me, and this is a nice reminder and additional information for me to continue to bring to our students. And I'm thinking about how multiple perspectives are really important, and as the teacher or instructor at any grade level, we're really busy with the day-to-day routine or requirements and expectations for outcomes that sometimes we don't take the time to try to understand another individual's perspective. And that's where we can get into punitive responses. So you didn't do this, well, this is the consequence. Like in the real world, this is what happens. And I'm preparing you for the real world. And taking a moment to listen to these students and look at the questions in your handouts, it reminds me that I need to step back and take some responsibility and also give agency to the students that I'm working with, and try to understand their perspective. And I think that the circle time can do that for students and for teachers.
Wow, thank you. There are a lot of gems in there. Yeah, I think unfortunately the process is not neat and tidy, you know what I mean? I think we get caught up in education sometimes with just like trying to get things done, and sometimes we run over our students as kind of like part of that process. So thank you for calling that out.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So I've been doing restorative practices at my school for quite some time, like I mentioned earlier, but something that we've been grappling with is, you know, not only just making sure that there's teacher buy-in across the board, but how to, you know, do we have that social justice committee, or is it, which this other idea, which I think is better, which is that you have social justice across all committees, that it's embedded within, you know, the culture of the whole school community. And I worry that when we just make one committee of, you know, social justice, that then the other committees don't take it and own it. So I'm wondering, how does that work at your school, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you kind of embedded the answer, you know, in your question, which I really appreciate. I do that sometimes as well, like comments that are disguised as questions, you know. But yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can take the silo approach with RJ. The sell for us here to really, you know, and I'm not going to say that we don't have to onboard people or, you know, remind people to be restorative, but I think the sell here is that we all want to be wholly integrated into the environment that we're a part of. We want to be connected. We want to feel like we matter, you know, with other adults. So we spend a lot of time in circles and doing icebreakers and, you know, inclusion activities. It is normalized at our school that we check in at the beginning of any PD that we do, you know, in a meaningful way, not just rushing through it. It is normalized that, you know, it's a little more difficult in the time of COVID, but it is normalized that we do circles as staff, right? And I feel good when I'm in circles, you know what I mean? I feel heard and seen, and like that translates naturally. Like I don't have to beg teachers to do circles because they've experienced them themselves and they know how much of a difference it makes just to humanize us first, right? And, you know, we talk about trauma all the time for our students, and all of the pain, you know, that comes with that, and ACEs and all of those kinds of things. You know, teachers have all of that too, you know, like teachers need care and kindness, I would say as much, if not more, than our students. So if you lead in that way, and you give the teachers the experiences that you're hoping your children will get, it usually works out pretty well. And then also you just have to be relentless with the data and the reality. Like the reality at our school is that Black kids are still getting left out. You know what I mean? They're still experiencing, you know, we call them achievement gaps, but that's obviously a misnomer. I think it's more of an opportunity gap. And so I think we keep pointing that out. We keep holding ourselves accountable to the fact that not everyone is being fully included. You know, our students with disabilities, same thing. You know, the numbers sometimes are horrifying. So we have to keep bringing those things up and say that, you know, this is what our kids need, and you know, that's what we're doing here. And you know, pretty much everyone at our school, except for, you know, I'll be honest, we do have tourists. You know, we have people that are only going to be at our school or a fit, you know, for a couple of years and no longer. So we have to work through that process too. But you know, the people that are here and mean it, you know, they get the work.
Perfect timing. It's 10:30.
Okay. All right. That was a longer, yeah. Didn't mean to go on so long for that, but you got me excited with that question.
No, that was great. I appreciate the answer. And I will just say, you know, because Tarik and I are both educators and we do talk a lot of shop at home, and we met through this work, that, you know, everything that he's saying really is true. You know, it's something that you embody. It's like in your pores. And, you know, I'm just so proud of him and the work that he's doing at Carver. And I used to work at Carver. I heard that Elvia also used to work at Carver. So I understand how challenging, we all know middle school, right? Middle school is really, really challenging in so many ways. And it's so amazing to see a school that has really invested in restorative practices and to have all of the staff working in collaboration with each other to really make a difference in the lives of the students. So just wanted to give props to everyone out there who's doing the work.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tarik and Marini. We really appreciate the presentation and the wealth of information and for your time today. So we are at 10:31 and we'll have a restorative practice of maybe stepping off the screen for 15 minutes. So we'll resume at 10:45 with our session 2 presentation. Thank you, everybody.